All right, we're out here today in Reno, Nevada, about a 45-minute drive from where I live in Truckee, California. Going to be doing some work on this house behind me here that I've done some other jobs on. Did an electric vehicle charger for this lady and a lot of little inside remodel jobs and things we're working on now. But today's project is we're going to install 6 recessed lights and also a Lutron dimmer switch that can be controlled remotely. So before we jump inside and get ready to start the install, do a quick tool check to show you everything I brought as far as materials, tools, and everything we needed today. Welcome to Revival Remodels. I'm Kyle, the founder, and this is my partner Megan. We've been remodeling homes our entire lives, and we're here to share our expert advice and money-saving tips on home improvement, remodeling, rental properties, and more. All right, let's get started with a quick tool check. Here you can see everything I brought out to the job today. Got it spread out right along the front sidewalk here. So nice and easy access. We don't need these, but I brought them because we might have some other work to do. These are the lights we're going to be installing. Little pancake lights, super popular. I will put a link to these in the description. So we're going to do 6 of those. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Got our Klein multimeter. Don't leave home without it. These are all the little transformer boxes that the lights plug into. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Over here, if you're going to be doing any electrical work, you got to have these. Electricians call them nail eaters. You can see this one's pretty beat up, and I think they're about 16 inches long, so they will go through one wall and through another wall. You can really bore deep if you got to run some wire in some funky spots. Klein screwdriver, 12-in-1. Electrical sniffer tester. You'll see us using that inside, also by Klein tools. And our Klein electrical wire strippers. And a right angle drill bit in case we got to get in a tight spot, which I know we already do. And should be all we need out of that bucket. Couple drill bits. Okay. Our 14-2 and 12-2 wire. We don't know what size wire we're going to be installing yet, but we'll discover what size wire we need as we go through the install. Milwaukee wire stapler, most important tool in the box. Instead of hand banging staples into your framing to hold the wire, this Milwaukee stapler shoots a 1-inch staple and holds the wire nice and tight. And you don't have to bang your fingers a bunch of times doing it. All right, in these other boxes, got a bunch of random stuff. Small screws, in case we need them. Electrical wire nuts and fittings, tape, and a bunch of blades, Allen keys, just in case, oscillator blades, and a headlight. Headlight, super important. We're going to be up in the attic. And I brought some adhesive, white caulking, drywall patch repair stuff, big foam, big gap filler, and then, oh yeah, gonna need the electrical fish tape. All right, so there's a hideous pile of everything we're gonna use. I'm gonna organize that into a bucket, and we're gonna take it inside and get rocking and rolling. All right, we're inside now and we're ready to begin the installation of our recessed lights. If you can see, I've got pieces of blue tape marked out on the ceiling where the lights are going to go. I just went over the layout with the homeowner, and we're going to do a total of 6 lights. Originally we had planned on 4. Luckily I brought 6 today, anticipating one might get dropped and broken or lost in transit. So I do have enough lights to do the full 6, and then we're going to be adding a dimmer switch to control those, and We're going to show you the entire process from start to finish. As far as layout goes, step number one, typically with the recessed lights in the ceiling that we're using that look like this, little pancake lights, and they have a little transformer box that goes with them. And so this will fit basically in any ceiling cavity, under a joist, a rafter, anything you have in the ceiling. And they're super low usage, Energy Star certified. And I have these in every house that I own. We have 3 properties, and I put them everywhere in every house. And I've never had one go bad. So I'm super happy with them. I will make sure that there's a link down there so you can check those out in the description. So for the layout, when you're mounting lights like that, it's a 6-inch recessed light. Typically you want to be 4 feet off of every wall, and then a minimum of around 5 feet between each light. So I'll give you a quick walk around. I don't know if you can see it, but I've used a laser level and made a line 4 feet from the front wall. And you'll see we have a piece of tape here. You'll see there's a piece of tape here and a piece of tape here. It's going to be our 3 lights right across the top, and they're 4 feet out from the wall, from the front wall, and then they're also 4 feet out from the side wall. The distance in between the lights is 5 feet. So 5 feet to here, 5 feet to there, 5 feet to this piece of tape, which may be out of the camera frame. And then we're 5 feet over to here, 5 feet over to here, and then 5 feet back to here, all while maintaining a distance of 4 feet off of any of the perimeter walls. So that's a general rule of thumb. You know, depending on your layout, maybe you want a spotlight in one particular place, like over the fireplace. Maybe you want to have a particular light over a piece of art, something like that. But if you're just doing a standard grid layout, that's an easy way to do it. Easy rule of thumb. Make sure that you're 4 feet off of any perimeter wall, and then at least 5 feet between that light and the next light. That guarantees you're going to have a nice light sort of broadcast that overlaps each other and provides angles so that you don't get a lot of shadows and things like that. All right, we hit a bit of a curveball when we went to start cutting these lights in, which is the same problem we had in several other rooms of this house. It's a pretty ugly job there, I understand, but if you look, the reason that cut is so ugly, you can see right here, this house was newly remodeled about a year or 2 ago before my client here bought this house, and there appears to be cement board on the ceiling, and you can see the white part above is drywall, which is about a 1/4 inch thick, and then this 1/2 inch thick board right beneath it appears to be cement board, and it's really nasty stuff, hard to cut. It is very crumbly, and I've never seen it used in any sort of ceiling or wall application. And they have this stuff on both the ceiling and the walls. So when you try to run a blade through it, it just crumbles and chips away, and destroyed 3 blades in about 2 minutes. So little curveball when we're going to cut these lights in. If this was drywall, you could get a really clean cut, but we're dealing with some nasty stuff here. If anybody knows what this material is or think you may know, please leave a comment because I am curious. Okay, so carrying on with this brutal curveball here, I made a little template. That's the same size as the light. I just traced it in cardboard and cut it out. And then up here on the ceiling, I traced that cutout exactly where I want it. And we're going to try and cut that out. If this was drywall, we could cut it in about 30 seconds using this little drywall knife. But since these lovely remodelers put cement board up on the ceiling, it is a brutal cutting. So we're going to get her done slow and steady. And I've used everything from a reciprocating saw to a jigsaw to a multi-tool, and nothing is really cutting clean here. I'm going to try to drill the perimeter of the hole here with this tiny little bit and see if we can get any cleaner of a cut. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's just destroying that. The paint is not adhering to it at all, and it just crumbles right out. Okay, we finally got all of our holes cut in the ceiling for our 6 lights, and it was a brutal cutting task because they had put some kind of cement board on the ceiling, and every cut we made just caused it to chip and crack. So I went around this morning before we started filming and touched the holes up with a little bit of drywall compound so they're nice and round and look like a much cleaner cut now. And we're ready to start the fun part, which is the electrical. Just want to show you how this goes up in the ceiling. Little transformer box there, and it's going to go right up inside this hole. I'm going to latch it up over the rafter there, and then you take these little blue clips. I'm going to go like this. Okay, we got all of our lights spread out here. Little transformer boxes are ready to go up in there. And we're going to be attempting to locate the switch for these lights right over here. Got all of our supplies ready to rock. And this light controls switch controls the light on the front porch. This one controls the entryway light right behind us. And this third light switch here, we have tried everything to figure out what it may control, but apparently we are not able to find it that it controls anything. So we're going to be using this switch as our light switch to control our 6 dimmable recessed lights. I did eventually figure out that this third light switch went to a junction box in the attic that appears to have been terminated. At one point it could have controlled a fan or a light in the attic or something, but I was able to rip that old wire out and get rid of that junction box and run a clean line for our lights right down to this switch. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is break down this box, pull all the switches out, and figure out what type of wiring we have in the wall. Could be 14 gauge wire for a 15 amp circuit. That's the wire that's typically coated in the white vinyl jacket. Or it could be a 12 gauge wire for a 20 amp circuit, which is typically the yellow coated wire that you find in the wall. So typically for lights it's a little bit thinner wire because lights are not high consumption devices. So I'm assuming we're going to use the white wire, the 14 gauge, and we're going to open this up. Before we start running all of the wire for our lights, we need to make sure we're going to have the same wire that's fed into these boxes. And so we haven't shut the power off yet. I typically like to wait to do that until I get the switches out, and then I can use some of my electrical tools to troubleshoot or label where the incoming power is, where the outgoing switch legs are. So still can be pretty dangerous if you haven't turned the power off yet. You don't want to grab anything behind there. Oh wow, look at this. We got a little piece of plywood in there to shim that. We're going to fix that. So we got all the switches removed. Like I said, you touch anything behind there and you're likely to get shocked. So I just like to pull these out with my fingers only on the top and bottom. Super old wiring. And so at this point, once we take a look at what we've got in here, that's interesting. I'm going to continue to pull this out, keeping in mind that it's a live box, but I want to show this. There are no ground wires because on the old school wiring, this is not white or yellow wire. It's like a woven jacket. Sometimes it's silver, sometimes it might be black. Let's see if I can zoom in here and show you that, you know, these are the modern wires we have today, right? The white and the yellow, that's typically what you're going to find in the walls of your house. Super old school wiring. Let's see if we can zoom here. There we go. You'll see that wire. All three of them are like a woven jacket, and it's not white or yellow. It's like a silvery black most times. And then if you also notice right here, here's their neutral wires, which are all of your white wires. Typically in a switch box application like this, all your white wires get tied together. And they didn't even use a wire nut. They've got some, not even electrical tape, looks like some old school fabric tape, and that's what's holding them together. So we're going to tidy this box up and make it look a lot nicer, and we're going to put a proper wire nut on there, and then we're going to be putting in a Lutron switch here as a dimmer switch to control our lights. Our purpose of getting in here was to figure out the thickness of the wire or the gauge of the wire so that we can use that same thickness up here in our attic space as we run our lights. And I can tell just from experience, it looks like we're dealing with 14 gauge wire. It's a little thinner, it bends easier, and I can tell that just from the feel of it, it's a 14 gauge wire. The other way to tell, they make a wire gauge that you can buy and carry around with you, but I don't really have the patience to do that. You can use your wire strippers, and they've got a 14 and a 12 gauge hole on there. And once we shut the power off here, which we'll do in a second, then you could use this very easily to stick over your wire and see if it fits in the 14 or the 12 gauge hole. I can just tell from experience based on the thickness of the wire and the way it bends that it's 14 gauge. All right, so we'll go shut the power off, and we're gonna wire up our new switch. A lot of times I'll do it live without shutting the power off, but since we gotta get a wire nut on our neutrals and do a little bit of heavy lifting in here, I'm gonna go ahead and shut it off. Every one of our switches has their little tie-in to the hotline, and this right here is our hotline coming in. So we've identified our power coming in, and that is basically it for the incoming power. Every switch connects to that, and we're going to go shut this off now and do our work. Wire in the new switch, get a proper wire nut on these neutrals here, and then we're going to reconnect our power line, bring the breaker back on, and we'll start wiring up these lights now that we know what we're working with. Okay, so we're out here at the electric panel, and of course, I don't see anything labeled living room lights, which is what I'm looking for. We've got heat pump. I labeled these actually for the homeowner before because they were not labeled. I installed the EV charger. It's this one, heat pump, air handler. So we know it's none of those. We're looking for a 15 or a 20. We got a dryer and a range up top. And so it's something here or something here. I'm going to take a guess and say it's these two 15s here, one of these two 15s that are unlabeled right here. So I'm going to turn those off, which I've already done, and then we'll go see inside if that does it. And then we can get, if it's one of these two, which I think it is, the unlabeled section, we'll go ahead and label those if we're correct. So let's go back in. I've got my electrical sniffer here. and we're going to check this wire and see if it's still hot or not. All right, let's do it. There it is. It's dead. So we got, out of those 2 breakers I assumed it might be, it is in fact one of them. So I'm going to run back out and flip one of those back on, and then we'll be able to isolate exactly which breaker it is. And they make tools to do this, but they're kind of expensive if you're just a homeowner trying to do something like this on a light remodel. Then you may not have expensive diagnostic tools that electricians typically use. So I'm showing you the kind of way to do it if you don't have those tools. All right, we're back at the wire. It's still dead. So that's good. We've isolated the breaker, and I don't know where my Sharpie is right now, but I'm going to go back out there and label that, and we'll label it power to living room lights. Okay, we're ready to start wiring. In order to do that, we have to get a wire up this wall through the plate at the top of the wall, which is typically 3 inches thick, and then we've got to make it through the attic and then into one of these light cans so that we can connect them all together and have the group of 6 come back over here down the wall and to our switch. So what we're going to have to do, I've gone up in the attic and it's such a low roof angle that there's no space to crawl over here. It's about this tall above there, so there's really no way to get a drill, a bit, or even a body over there to do it. So in order to get this wire from the switch up the wall, across the ceiling to the lights, we're going to have to cut a little hole in the paneling. I wish it was drywall, but we're going to cut a little hole here that will allow us to feed that wire up and over to the lights. All right, so I want to cut this hole basically directly above the electrical box, because you can typically count on that being hollow because the stud or the framing is typically on the left or the right. Typically you can hear that, and especially we have a door here, so there's probably could be framing on the left and right. So we want to put this hole as close up here to the top plate of the wall. At the top of your wall there's typically 1 or 2 boards 1.5 inches thick sandwiched together, and that separates your wall from your attic space. So we're going to go right above where the box is, and we're going to cut. I'm just using this triple gang plate as a marker because that's about the size we want, something I can get a drill bit in and sneak up into the attic through this hole. Okay, now that we've got our hole cut up top, we want to drill a hole up into the attic space, just like those other 2 wires that we see there. We should potentially consider seeing if we can run the wire through one of the holes that's already there. That way we can basically replace this old wire here that's no longer needed. If we can pull this thing, if it's been stapled a bunch, it's not really going to pull. But if they didn't staple it a bunch, we can get it out. Look at that, I think it might work. Yep, I got it. And this wire is the one that we no longer need. Ooh, I'm stuck. There we go. Beautiful. This one is the one we couldn't locate. It appears it went to a light or something at one point. I'm gonna see, I feel a staple down there. And if I can get my pullers down in this hole, I think I can get it off. Grab onto the edge of that staple. I can feel you. And then just pull upwards. I think I got it. Yeah, it just fell off, but I got it. All right, so now we have this old wire. This is the one that was previously going from the switch to something. I'm gonna try and stuff as much of it up there as I can. Even all the way through if I can. That way when I go up in the attic in a minute, this will be easy to see. I'm gonna see if I can shove that in there. It's almost all the way through. I would like to get it all the way through so I can shove my new wire up in there. We're gonna run this white wire up through the pre-existing hole where we took the old wire out. And we're gonna see if we can make it come out this hole at the top. And I think we can do it. This will be the initial feed wire bringing power from the switch to the lights. Oh, look at that. And there you can see that we've got that wire going in the bottom and then out the top. All right, you can see we've fed our white wire, 14 gauge wire, up the switch box, through the wall, which there's no insulation in the wall, so that made it very easy. And then we're gonna run that wire right up through the hole that was pre-existing that held that other wire. Doesn't want to go all the way through, so what I'll do is I'll cut this off, the old wire, and it should go up in the attic space where we're going to pull it out later. Okay, now I want to get the white wire up in there. And I think I did. And we're going to start feeding it up little by little into the attic, and then once we get a few feet up there, we're going to go and look for it. Okay, feel pretty good about that. Now we're going to go up in the attic, see if it's visible, and then we're going to wire these puppies up. Okay, we're up here in the attic. I am out of breath and I got a mask on, so excuse my breathing. But if you look really closely right down there, we can see our wire that we fed up. And right over there, you can see our first light hole right there that we created. So we just got to pull that wire in. And then I also brought up the transformer boxes we need to install. And here we go. So there it is. There's the new white wire right there. And then that's the old wire we're going to cap off. I don't know what it went to, but we're not going to use it. So we're just going to pull this white wire up and over as far as we can. And then we're going to take it and we're going to put it down in the hole right there for our first light. Okay, so here's our first light hole, and we got our white wire coming from the switch, and this will be our first light location. I'm going to take one of these little transformer boxes that connects to the light, and we're going to stick it right here. So we're going to go around and mount 6 of these boxes, and we'll do it right above every light hole that we created underneath. All right, so now we've got our boxes mounted in the attic. We're gonna go ahead and drop this white wire into the first box using one of these little black wire clamps, traditionally they're called. And to get into that box, I'm gonna need to knock out one of these little holes up in there. You can typically do it with your finger. And then we'll push our wire through it. Let's see here, there we go. Through the clamp connector. Into our little box. Push that clamp connector in. Okay. Now we're ready to connect some wiring. They come preloaded with little wire connectors on them. So we'll strip this back. Show you what this looks like in a second. So what we have up in here, got our black wires connected there, white wires connected there, and the ground wire connected there. And then all you have to do, push everything in to that box and close the lid, just like that. And this end here connects to our light, and that first wire is connected. Now we're gonna do a series of lights off of this one. So I'm gonna open that back up, and our next wires are gonna connect into here and go on down to the other lights. Okay, now that we've got our first light connected, it's time to jump all these other ones together using more of our 14 gauge wire. Okay, we're back up in the attic. This is our first box. Got one wire coming in from our switch that we have downstairs, and then the next wire going out, and a staple here at the entrance of the box. And now we're gonna tie these wires to the other 5 lights. Okay, I was able to send the wire from the first light that we just wired up in the last shot, and basically repeated the process 5 times and just created a daisy chain of 14 gauge wire from the first light to the second light, third light, fourth light, all the way to the 6th light, which was the end of the lighting circuit. And then we went around and put all of our lights up into the hole that we cut and secure the blue clips behind the surface of the ceiling there. And we had to do a little touch up because our holes were kind of chipped due to the material that we discussed earlier. Okay, we got all our lights connected with wires in between them. We continued our 14 gauge wire up through the top of the framing plate at the top of the wall, and then over to the 6 lights that we connected in the attic. And the last thing we have to do is finish up our box here. So I've got a headlight on because our breaker is off, so hopefully this illuminates it for you. All of our white or neutral wires have been connected and are pushed to the back of the box as well as the ground. And the last thing we have to do is connect our switch. One of the switch legs goes out to the light. We're going to do that one first. If you have threaded wire, stick it all the way in the wire nut first, and then go to connect to the solid copper wire. If you don't stick the stranded wire all the way up in the wire nut first, it's not going to bite and it'll come loose. Same thing over here. We got 3 black wires coming together. Slide this down so you can potentially see them right there. And then we're going to stick the threaded wire all the way in and then push down and get the threaded part of the wire nut down over the solid copper wires. And we're ready to rock. Now, a couple things before you close this up. I always like to keep electrical tape nearby, and you don't have to, but it helps me to sleep at night. If you wrap these in electrical tape so that any chance of a wire that got pushed in and may potentially make contact, this ensures that you won't get any sparks behind your wall due to wires like your ground wire touching your hot wire, for example. And it makes it easier for you to grab them and feel a little bit safer. I did find a couple loose wires in here that I tuned up off camera. And what we've got here, while I'm taping, I see a problem coming. When someone did this remodel about a year ago before we came along, and as you'll notice, the electrical box is about a ½ inch back from the surface of the wall, and that's a problem because when you go to put your outlet or your receptacle or your light switch into that spot, it's going to sink back there, and when you put your cover plate on like this, you're going to have a real big problem because your light switch is going to be sunk back in the wall and look like garbage. So we got to fix that. There's a couple ways you can fix this problem. The right way to have done it would have been to put a new box when they were doing the remodel, but it looks like they skim coated the wall with, there's 3 or 4 different surfaces here, and the box is back there about a ½ inch. So a couple ways you can deal with this issue. What they had done previously was stuffed a little piece of plywood in there and then screwed through it to essentially shim the switches out. And we're not doing that because that's just going to eventually rot and break after you run a screw through it. So what we've got, the thing I would like to have that I don't currently have on hand, they make a metal plate that goes behind here, and it'll fit just behind the plate cover, and that metal plate will act sort of as a barrier so that the switches cannot go back behind the surface of the wall. And those are really nice. What I have is an alternative solution. These are called caterpillars, electricians call them. And they're essentially just little shims that will go behind your switches. So when you have a sunk box, the switch plate will sit flush with your light switches and everything will look clean, and you won't have a gap around your switch plate, or your light switch won't be sunk in the wall and looking dangerous. Okay, so let me show you how the caterpillars work. This box is a bit of a disaster, but we're going to make it work. My instinct is to tear the whole thing out and go get a new box and put a new box in, but I thought it would be a good way to show you guys. All right, so here's how the caterpillars work. You can fold them over. We're going to need, typically I've only used 2 of these, maybe 3 at a time. They break off. Here we got at least a ½ inch to try and make up to get back flush to the surface of the wall. So you can kind of put this in there and start to measure. Okay, I need more. So I ended up using 4 here. Looks like about a ½ inch. And so yeah, that looks like it's going to work. You can see after I add that, it's going to act as a shim to bring the outlet out. All right, so that's basically, we're going to need a 4-pack all the way around. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of pre-assemble these in groups of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks like I just need to rip it right in half because there's 8 on a stick. And I'm going to need 3 sets total, so that's 6, and I've got 4. Let me grab another. All right, so we got all our shims pre-made here. And let's start to install one and see if and how it works. We may have to do some chiseling here to get this resolved, but this is a painful process that we've done many times. So, looking for a couple screws back here in my arsenal. I didn't bring, they make really long screws that fit in here, and I don't have any on hand, but I got some that'll work. Okay, so basically you slip this thing right over the screw. I guess go behind here, and then we're gonna run our screw. I'm gonna need my drill here. We're gonna run our screw right through the caterpillars. All right, there's one. Same thing on the other side here, the bottom. I think that screw might be too fat. We're gonna get a skinnier one. I'm working with some random screws here because I didn't really come prepared for this issue, but I should have. I guess I am prepared, just not with what I prefer to have. Okay, so run our screw through. So now get a good side profile of what it should look like with the shims stacked up and the screws ran through. And now that's going to help to hold that back right at the surface of the wall where we want it. Now I can see we got some stuff back here that we probably want to chip out that's going to get in our way. So I'm just going to redneck it, stick my drill bit up there and knock some of this out of the way. Same on the bottom. Yeah. Not happy, but it will work. There we go. All right. All right, let's set this switch in here. I'm gonna kind of shape the box together and kind of one at a time set these into place as we apply the shims, the caterpillars, and the screws. Okay, so we'll go back, do that last 10%, just a little bit on each one until they lay flat right. You want the metal tabs basically to lay flat with the surface of the wall that stick out the top and the bottom. If they're sitting too far back, you gotta fix that, bring it out more with more shims. If they're sticking out like buck teeth too far forward, then you need to maybe take a shim out, one of the caterpillar shims there. All right, this is looking decent. It's always a little bit of an alignment game because when you go to put the cover on, like this, how is everything gonna look? So far, it looks pretty good. Okay. So the left switch looks perfect. The middle one needs to slide over to the right, kind of cockeyed. And then the Lutron switch, the bottom needs to slide over. Okay, technically we're in there. Still want that bottom right to come over more though. All right, I think we're good to go. Looks nice and flush with the surface here. Bottom looks okay. You can see the wall, if you notice, is flexing quite dramatically. And so we're working with what we were dealt here, and we're gonna make it work. Okay, got our little screws here. We're gonna go pretty tight. Try to get all this loose tomfoolery that's in this box that we were dealt with to tighten. And this box is looking beautiful. Let's see, there we go. If your screw won't go in, turn it towards the left, or if that doesn't work, then turn it back towards the right. You gotta catch that little tiny screw hole down there. Okay, tighten that up. Always go vertical with the screws. Make it nice and neat. And we're good to go. All right, we're gonna flip the breaker on and check out our lighting circuit. Okay, we just flipped on the circuit, got a little green light, and moment of truth. Bam! All 6 lights working great. So our wire that we ran went from that switch up through the top plate of the wall, into the attic, over to this light, and then we simply just jump to that light, to there, finally here, where the lighting circuit ends. Everything looks like it's working great. Dimmability function working great. And I've already gone to set up the, back there in the corner, you can see the Lutron hub that connects to the router. And we've got our Lutron switch working, and she can now control this from anywhere. You will see links at the top of your screen right now to subscribe to our channel or watch our next video. Also, check our video description for links to all the products that we used in today's video.